The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Nato Summit, is taking place today in London in the United Kingdom. For more on that meeting, we're now joined by our correspondent, Holly Hudson. Holly, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. So, this NATO treaty was signed 70 years ago. It should be a time of celebration and a show of unity. But certainly within the last hour, it's been nothing like unity at all.
Yes, well, that's what Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, has been calling for: unity, a show of solidarity. And of course, as you said there, this is meant to be a celebration of the 70th anniversary of the alliance. But it's been quite difficult to paper over the cracks here in Watford, just outside of London. The 29 world leaders have been discussing a number of issues around the round table for a number of hours. That meeting has just finished, and we've had a press conference from the Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, where he told us that they discussed a number of issues, covered a number of areas. He said there was a good atmosphere, it was productive, constructive, and they'd made a number of decisions around things like space, where they would look to address the challenges, as well as the rise of China, which they discussed for the first time, including the security and rollout of 5G. There's also discussions about substantive discussion about Russia, but of course there was no getting away from the disputes and the disagreements that have reared their head during this summit. On that issue, Jens Stoltenberg said that of course there's going to be disagreements. It would be strange if there wasn't, but NATO's history proves that they are able to overcome those disagreements and move forward, and that is exactly what they've done today, in particular in relation to Article 5, a fundamental principle of NATO. He said that all of the allies agreed to get behind that principle, to commit to it, and all for one and one for all was how he described it. But of course there's already signs of fresh disputes, particularly between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister. Donald Trump in the past few hours saying that the Canadian Prime Minister is two-faced, and as we know, yesterday Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump also came to blows over Macron's comments that the alliance is brain dead. Donald Trump described that as nasty and disrespectful. But as well, there's also issues surrounding Turkey's incursion of northern Syria. Jens Stoltenberg said that wasn't discussed at this meeting. He also expressed concern over Turkey's decision to buy missiles from Russia. So some still very contentious issues that maybe haven't been discussed at these meetings, but definitely will have been on the sidelines in several bilateral meetings. And we're set to hear from the UK Prime Minister and President Donald Trump this hour as well. So no doubt there'll be more developments to come.
All right, talking about sidelines, there is this chatter on Twitter about some leaders apparently making fun of President Trump, and this sort of incited him leaving abruptly and calling the Canadian president two-faced.
Yes, this is just one of the signs of yet another crack appearing in this, particularly with regards to Donald Trump. Of course, he's never one to shy away from controversy. He's definitely made his appearance here in the UK known. This is his third visit to the country, of course, and each time he causes upheaval in some way. The lengthy press conference, almost an hour-long press conference that we had yesterday of him with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, he came out with some pretty extraordinary comments during that in relation to Emmanuel Macron, and now he seems to have turned aiming his fire now at the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, following their bilateral meeting yesterday. But as I say, we're set to hear from Donald Trump in the next hour or so. Of course, one of his main criticisms of NATO has been what he describes as delinquent nations not spending enough on defence. He particularly what he calls this threshold of 2% of GDP, and he has been very critical of nations, including Germany, for example, about their unfair amount of spending as he sees it. He believes or claims that the US spends more than 4%. And we did hear today from Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, General that there has been a commitment to spending more on the alliance. So no doubt that will be music to Trump's ears, but we'll hear exactly what he has to say about that in the next hour.
All right, I suppose that 70 years on, it made a whole lot of sense 70 years ago after World War I to have this NATO come into being. I wonder, 70 years later, are questions being asked about the role that NATO continues to play? Is it a useful one? Or is it, like the Commonwealth, perhaps a nice club to belong to?
Yes, we've heard from the Secretary-General say that NATO is more agile, more adaptable than ever before, and still very much has a role to play in the modern world. The way that Boris Johnson as well says he sees it is that it's an alliance that protects 1 billion people still, and that he wants the UK maintain the role of the glue, as he puts it, between the EU and, of course, America and Canada across the Atlantic. So Boris Johnson, of course, hoping that these eruptions will not have continued to boil over here in the UK, but be very difficult to paper over the cracks as we see it now.
All right, Holly, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thanks very much indeed. That's Holly Hudson, our correspondent in the UK, giving us an update on the situation at the now just finished North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO members, 29 of them. There were just 12 when they formed in 1949 on the 4th of April, but that number has grown over time to 29. And just to give you an idea of just the force that the collective have, 70% of the world's total military spend is spent by these 29 NATO members, and they're all in an agreement that by 2024, 2% of the total country's GDPs should be spent on military by 2024. So very, very important organization. And as Boris Johnson, you've heard there from Holly Hudson, was saying, all for one for all, unity 70 years on, still a very important role to play.